content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families. The Epstein story is the one the government insists is finished or doesn't need further investigation. But some of the most troubling questions were never fully investigated. Now, in court documents made public in 2019, Virginia Giuffre accused former New Mexico Governor and U.S. Energy Secretary Bill Richardson of sexual misconduct tied to Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking network. Richardson denied these allegations. And then there's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, Epstein's most mysterious property, an 8,000-acre compound in a high desert where victims say abuse took place. And yet, unlike Epstein's home in New York, Palm Beach, and the notorious Caribbean island, Zorro Ranch was never thoroughly searched. Why? Well, today we're connecting the dots with someone who understands how power and intelligent networks really operate. Robert Eringer once built Monaco's first intelligence service for Prince Albert II, working with agencies like the CIA, MI6. Along the way, he encountered the same elite circles where Jeffrey Epstein moved. So Robert wrote the book, The Spy Master of Monte Carlo, and today he's sharing what he knows. So with that being said, it's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries Mayhem. Amber Lowe, I am your host, Winnie Schrader. Well, tonight I wanted to get a guest on. I love the whole espionage, James Bond, Mission Impossible, all the, secret operatives, that kind of stuff. And like with this whole Epstein issue, there has to be some type of intelligence group that is working all this out to stay under the radar. And I figured, why not get a guest who is an expert on how these networks of people operate? And I got author Robert Eringer on, who wrote the book, The Spy Master of Monte Carlo. He was the one who built the first intelligence service for Prince Albert II. So obviously he knows what he's talking about, and he knows the inner workings of how these people stay underground and work these networks to obtain the gold that they want. Now, in the Epstein case, that's obviously to keep people, hidden, the secret society they had. I don't even know. I mean, the Epstein files, it gets more shocking the more stuff comes out. But I wanted to welcome Robert to the show. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you, Winnie, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, so the book, The Spy Master of Monte Carlo, um, you obviously, so you put a whole intelligence agency together for the Prince of Monaco. Did Monaco not have any type of agency that protected the monarchy at all, or?
Monaco did not have an intelligence service. It had merely a police department. And inside the police department were three men who ran a political unit, who I ended up working with once I went to work for Albert, but that you wouldn't consider them they were doing local intelligence, I would say, but not the kind of intelligence Albert needed, and why he retained me in June of 2002 to first be his intelligence advisor and keep him informed about certain things. And then later, when he ascended the throne, and that wasn't until April 2005, after his father, Prince Rainier, passed away, so that at that point, I had the green light to create the Monaco Intelligence Service, which was still
Okay.
unofficial because we did not want to be part of the government structure. Albert wanted me to report only to him and be outside the workings of Monaco's government.
Was he did he ki was he did he feel kind of paranoid by the I guess, behind the monarchy? Was he afraid that people didn't want him at the head of the throne? Or, I mean, did he fear
No, he
for
had
his
no fears
safety?
like that.
Okay.
Although he should have, because there were things going on at the time that might have circumvented his
Oh,
ascension to the throne. But no, he was perfectly relaxed, but was concerned in two particular areas. One, there had been a Russian surge into the French Riviera, which includes Monaco, uh, at that time, and he was concerned that it would attach itself to Monaco. They had mostly been along the French Riviera in Nice and Cannes, hadn't quite gotten to Monaco yet, but concerned him. Uh, he also had concerns about the kind of people who were trying to barge their way into his inner circle, his orbit. Everybody in Monaco plays a game called Who Can Brown Their Nose the Deepest, and everybody wants to be Prince Albert's friend. There are so many people who call themselves Prince Albert's best friend, and
oh,
he's constantly fighting him off. So when a newcomer would come along, especially from some country elsewhere, he felt he should know more about them, and that was his second main reason for bringing me in.
okay. Yeah, because you always think of Monaco, you always think of it as kind of, exotic, kind of not tropical, but just, that Italian,
It's
yeah, like glamorous nightlife, elegant, you know, and you always think you see it in spy movies. They're always playing Baccarat at a table.
James Bond movies, especially, yeah,
Yeah.
features
So,
heavily. And of all the microstates of Europe, none of which had, I discovered, their own intelligence service. Like Monaco, they were dependent on other countries. Um,
mhm,
but it's where the Russians and others who were up to no good, money laundering mostly, would want to be, as opposed to, say, Liechtenstein or Andorra or Luxembourg, which aren't quite as glamorous, nor have the amenities and the fine weather that Monaco enjoys.
okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a bad job location to be at. I can tell you that. It's
I
luxury.
enjoyed it. I'd lived there before, and I kept a safe house there, which is where we had all of our meetings, where Albert would be briefed, and where, when we had visiting members of other intelligence services, would meet. And it's also, I used it as a place to sleep when I was in Monaco. I actually lived in London at the time and commuted back and forth between London and Monaco, sometimes on a weekly basis,
Wow.
specifically because Albert wanted me as invisible as possible. He didn't
Okay.
want the government to know about the existence of his intelligence advisor, and even later, his own intelligence service.
Wow. So, I mean, okay, so you're setting up this intelligence agency basically under the radar because he doesn't. What was the reason he did not want the Monaco government to know of his intelligence agency that he had protecting him and
Mm.
his
Because they
wife?
wouldn't want him to have an intelligence agency. They wouldn't want him to have an intelligence advisor. They wanted him to rely only on what they told him about what was going on. And in fact, even before I entered the picture, nobody was telling him anything. He was just the hereditary prince. Even his own father, who was unwell his last few years, uh, didn't really keep him in contact. Yet here was Albert flying to all parts of the world for stately occasions and knowing little about the leaders of such countries that he was meeting. Uh, I was able to provide him briefings so that he knew what he was walking into from that point onward.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of like his go-to person for all things, for information, for security, for now, with that being said, was he using your talents and capabilities to help him find out information within the workings of the government that they were trying to keep from him, so he was
Well,
unaware of?
yeah, no, good question. That came later, and in an area I really should never have gotten involved in because primarily I was foreign intelligence, and that is who's coming from foreign countries, where is he going that he needs to be briefed about. I got into the inner workings of Monaco's government after he ascended the throne and began vetting people who would continue to remain in government, and also people who would help him run the palace. And that is when we ran into a lot of corruption and found out exactly why Albert always wanted us to be outside the government system, reporting only to him, because we
Oh.
found that they were terribly corrupt, and he wanted to do something about it, which is why, say, the third reason he brought me in initially was to help him clean up the principality. He determined that once he became the monarch, that he would introduce, and he used this line at his investiture, a new ethic to Monaco. And to do that properly, he needed to have the kind of information about who was rotten, who was dirty in in Monaco that needed to be got rid of.
Wow. That's scary to think that somebody who is, I know a lot of times now it's like monarchies, they're just more like figureheads than anything. Because like with the British monarchy, you have parliament, they pretty much control what happens, so everyone thinks they're just kind of figureheads, but he really wanted to be involved with the workings of the government, but obviously
Well,
they were trying to put
he,
a
he
fork in that.
Well, he thought he did, and the Constitution allows him to do that. In fact, Monaco is one of the last remaining absolute monarchies in the world. I don't think Albert ever understood the power that he had, and instead relied on the government, who unfortunately continues to this day to run circles around him. That came up later when we were doing corruption. And after we got into it and discovered that Monaco is very corrupt indeed, Albert took a step back and decided, well, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to try to clean things up. That is why I eventually ended my work for Albert after 5.5 years, because it turned out in the end he didn't have the backbone to stand up to the corruption and clean it up like he said he would.
Okay. So, with you going through and vetting and finding all this information out, especially within the corruption of the government, was there stuff that you were pretty shocked by, that you came across, or was it kind of the typical political corruption wheel that we see on a day-to-day basis?
It reached a point it was so shocking, it just became amusing. It became funny because just when you thought you'd heard it all, then there was something else coming along. You have to remember, Monaco is a rather intriguing place, not just because of being featured in James Bond movies and being glamorous, but you have uh, nationalities from over 100 countries who live in what is the most expensive place in the world to own real estate. And you had a
Mm.
confidential, and still do, a confidential banking system that they all, those who were up to no good, wanting to launder their money, clamored to be part of as a way of laundering money. So you had all of this intrigue going on, and everybody from everywhere who had loads and loads of money that needed laundering, uh, hanging out there, living there part of the year, trying to become residents, trying to join the prince's orbit. It was fascinating. I really enjoyed the whole experience.
Wow. Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, your life itself kind of plays out like a Bond movie if you think about it. I mean, it's just,
and
trying to find the corruption and get rid of it, but you can't because people they're so it's everybody's so intertwined with each other. It's hard to, upset the apple cart. That's amazing, and to
Uh,
know that
ag-
the stuff you were finding, wow.
Again, especially with Monaco, so closely knit, the Monegasques who live in Monaco are outnumbered by about 7 to 1 by everybody else who lives there. In fact, there are more Italians who live in Monaco than Monegasques. The Monegasques themselves are very tightly knit, which was part of the problem when it came to trying to clean up the corruption, because here we were reporting to Albert that some of his closest advisors, his own personal lawyer, and the palace accountant and various ministers running the ministries were all very corrupt. And yet these were people that Albert knew from when he was a little boy and went to school
Mhm.
with. And I think that ultimately what happened is, after listening to his talk about cleaning it up and realizing that he really meant it, especially when word eventually got out that he had his own little intelligence service that was getting to the bottom of everything, you can imagine they went to him and they said, "Albert, don't you get it? This is how we do things in Monaco. This is how we make money. This is our bread and butter, and you're doing what you're doing. You're messing with our rice bowls. So please stop, desist." And he
Yeah.
listened, and then he drifted away from our influence and what we were doing, even though by this time I'd created liaison relationships with 20 different foreign intelligence agencies, including our own CIA and the British MI6, the French DST, the Italian SISMI, their foreign intelligence service. They would come to Monaco at 48 hours notice to brief Prince Albert and me on any topic that he wanted to know more about. Unfortunately, taking the action that he did, stepping away from cleaning the place up, is he walked away from all of those relationships.
Oh, wow. It's kind of sad to think that it was just like easier for him just to stick with the status quo than to actually make some positive changes for the country.
And the reason
And
for that was not just because corruption had always been a way of life in Monaco, but Albert himself had no backbone. He has no backbone. He was never truly interested, I discovered, in affairs of state, more interested in just having affairs. His social life, his personal life always came first. And it seemed like even when he was sitting in his intelligence briefings, learning awesome things from very senior officials from intelligence services, it looked like his mind was on whatever his date was going to be that night.
hmm, not taking the job seriously, apparently. Well,
Well,
that
and yet the first indication of that was after his father passed away and Albert ascended the throne. He didn't stand up and take charge. He didn't, I don't think he knew quite what to do, even though I and a few others who were, I consider, the good guys around him, were saying, look, you've got to make your move now and consolidate your power and let everybody else know you're in charge. Instead, he chose to abide by, or at least his rationale was, well, I have to go through a 6-month mourning period, which for him meant hanging out at the family farm in the Alps behind Monaco in France, and importing sea sand in for his volleyball court.
oh,
He
first
just
world problems.
he didn't take his new role seriously. He didn't know how to stand up to anybody. He's a
Wow.
very shy man,
Mhm.
and it explains partly his stutter that's always plagued him. And he avoids confrontation, so that he won't call somebody in and have it out with them. It just very lackadaisical with no backbone when it came to exerting power, which his position allowed for it.
Mm. Yeah. It yeah, you have to have some type of backbone to take leadership, especially doing things that not everybody likes, but you're gonna do it because it's the right thing to do, and, yeah, obviously, he fell short in that when it came to his leadership skills.
Yes.
Now he just falls into that puddle of corruption like everybody else, and
Sadly, that's exactly what happened. For instance, he appointed to be the head of the judiciary, the justice, the equivalent of what we call the attorney general. the justice
Okay.
minister, even though we determined that that individual was very, very corrupt. And he was already a senior judge, and he was already a head of Monaco's Red Cross, which he appeared to be stealing from. And
Oh.
we briefed Albert, we investigated it, and even the small unit I mentioned in Monaco's police department was in on this. And and we I practically pled with him not to make that appointment. I told him if he did, it would one day come back to haunt him, and it would be very bad for his legacy. Sure enough, Albert went ahead and made him the justice minister of Monaco. And about 10 years later, the French media exposed that person for rampant corruption.
Mhm.
And he had to resign or be fired, but he resigned first in disgrace. And Albert was made to look the fool that he was for ever having hired him in the first place.
Ugh, gosh. Yeah, you should have listened. Don't you hate it when you have to say, I told you so?
Well,
You know?
you can only you know what they say, you can bring a horse to water.
Mhm.
You can't make it drink. It was our job to make sure that Albert was as well informed as he could possibly be, and we did a quite amazing job on a shoestring of a budget to make him extremely well informed. But
Yeah.
finally, given the information he needed to crack down on the persons in Monaco who should have been cracked down on or who shouldn't have been appointed to very, very significant positions in Monaco's government, he fell far short and shot himself in the foot to a point that today nobody, as far as I can tell, takes him seriously.
Can you feel it? The shift in the air, the longer days, the promise of something new. Spring isn't just a season, it's a reminder that growth is always possible, and maybe this is your time to bloom. At Love and Lotus Tarot with Wendy Schrader, she can help you clear the energy of the past and step confidently into what's next. Whether you're navigating love, questioning your path, or simply searching for clarity, the cards offer insight, direction, and empowerment. This is your season of renewal, your season of healing, your season of stepping into alignment. Thus, uncover the answers waiting for you and plant the seeds for the life you truly deserve. So, book your reading today with Love and Lotus Tarot and let's welcome the new beginning together. Visit lovelotustarot.com. Again, that is lovelotustarot.com and book your session today.
Okay. Now, you said that he likes to have affairs and, his social life was so important. And, with you obviously having to vet a lot of the people that are coming in and out of his life, how, like, how did that play out? And h- how did that tie in with this whole Epstein circles? I mean, was he listed in any of the documents, or was it just kind of, associated by people they all knew?
No, no, it almost surprises me that Albert has never been named in any of the Epstein files. Is never kept, and that surprises me because he would have been very ripe for the kind of thing Epstein was up to. What was revealing to me later on, of course, but early on when I saw it was how Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, was Albert's closest contact and friend in the British royal family. And the reason for that, we all knew at the time, was because
Mhm.
of their mutual interest in women. And I mean, let's face it, Andrew was known for years and years, for decades, by the satirical fortnightly private eye as Randy Andy. That was his nickname. Long
Yep.
before Americans knew about him and Epstein, he was Randy Andy to the British public. Albert fits into that same paradigm of bachelors. Albert was a bachelor at the time that I was working for him, who who enjoyed, shall we say, the interviewing process for Princess.
Okay. So he just liked to have arm candy on when he had big events and things like that, and he would just
Y-
go through women like crazy, or
I'd say go through women like crazy, not necessarily bring them out to the various galas of Monaco, but yes, women like crazy.
Oh, okay. And did he ever like marry? I guess
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know much about Prince Albert
Yeah.
other than that his behavior seemed very much like Prince Andrew. Well, former Prince Andrew. He's got his title stripped from him, and for good measure because that guy is something else. So,
Yeah, he finally got married. It was after I was working for him. He's still married, although as far as I understand it, the marriage is a bit of a sham. I don't know if that's true. It's only what I've heard. I don't really pay a lot of attention to Monaco anymore. In fact, writing this book was kind of the cathartic exercise of once and for all be done with everything to do with Monaco. But yes, he did get married. He does have twins, a boy and a girl. So he's got an heir who will succeed him one day, and it's perhaps an estranged marriage.
oh, okay. So it's kind of just a marriage and name only type thing, and
Seems to be the case, but like I said, I don't keep track of it so much anymore, and that's more of a
Mhm.
gossipy thing than it is with the kind of substance that we were dealing with when I was working for him.
Okay. So now the people that have been that would surround themselves around Prince Albert when you were working there, now did you come across anything of like the Epstein stuff, the illegal activity, weird I don't even know what to call it. I mean, it's sex trafficking and human trafficking, but I don't even know what to call what I mean, it's just disgusting what
Yeah. No, no, here,
it is.
yeah, no, I think I understand your question, and yes, in passing, because of concern to me was, Albert's security. So, for instance, if he were to visit, Russia, one would have to assume that his hotel room would be bugged, and whatever he was
Mhm.
doing with women or men would be recorded, possibly with a view to one day leveraging him into making a favorable decision their way. And it alarmed me when I'd heard a a so-called friend of, Albert's, a man by the name of Gocha Adevasi, not from Russia, from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, but who lived in Moscow, knew Putin, rented out a whole brothel in Moscow for Albert and his friends to celebrate his birthday. That was,
Wow.
2004 or 2005, and that concerned me because I had been cautioning him about even just, being on a trip in Russia and whatever he was doing, some stately affair of just not doing anything in his hotel room that he'd want to come back and haunt him because it would almost 100% be taped.
Yeah.
Um, so that was fairly alarming. And then there was, another place that I understood he used to go to, an Eyes Wide Shut kind of place in a town
Mhm.
called San Caggiano outside of Florence, owned by, Gotcha again, the same man from Georgia.
Mhm.
Secretly, he didn't want to have it in his name because he was trying to escape from, taxes in Russia, but it was his, and I visited the place to check it out, to see what it was all about, and it was all filled with erotica that remind me completely of Stanley Kubrick's movie Eyes Wide Shut. And then lo
Yeah.
and behold, I then began hearing whispers about, yeah, this Albert's been here, and yeah, this is where a lot of these folks come for orgies and so on. And then I heard other things, and this is hearsay. I'm not saying it is fact,
Mhm.
but I'd heard that many women, that there was a modeling agency in Paris that recruited women, even underage women, especially to go down for these parties.
Ew. Gross. I know I don't understand why these people in these elite positions, people that are part of a monarchy or presidents or leaders of countries, they're so into this weird underground sex trafficking stuff. It's just bizarre to me that it seems like there's this commonality between being like this elite person and then doing these weird group sex things that I just don't understand. And looking at Prince Albert stuff because I was, going through news articles. I'm just like, yeah, like you said, it's very much like Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut movie. It's like the secret society that it's hidden. There's like secret passwords, and it's
Here's
very
why.
bizarre.
Here's why, and I'll explain it to you. And it's not necessarily a power elite thing. It's a celebrity thing.
Mhm.
And I'll explain that in that when when if you're Prince Albert and you can have sex pretty much all the time with any woman you want, and they're all throwing themselves at you on the basis some of them believe that they may be the next princess of Monaco.
Yeah.
Uh, the threshold for excitement grows ever higher. So that if
Okay.
you're in that category where you're an A-list Hollywood star or you're a member of a royal family like Andrew or Albert, just plain ordinary sex doesn't do it anymore.
Okay.
And then you get into other stuff, and then you get into kinkier stuff, and then you get into even kinkier stuff. And the threshold keeps rising. The more free sex is for you, the easier it is to get. And that would be why what you're muddling with the power elite, it's more of a celebrity thing. Celebrities who never have a problem getting a date and having sex.
Yeah, I find it just interesting how it's just the correlation between, these type of people and the things that they do, and you see it across the board. And it's coming on the Epstein files, who's been involved. I mean, these top people. And it's just like, oh God, why are some of the stuff that is in those documents, I'm like, oh my God, that's so bizarre.
Yeah.
And to know that, I mean, like, it's very common, I guess. I mean, you see it a lot, and you having kind of firsthand account with Prince Albert being his right hand man for what, 5 years? You said he worked for him.
5.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. It's
Oh, it was
and
frustrating for me
everything
because,
for him under.
well, I was trying my best to keep him informed, but also keep him out of trouble. But I
Yeah.
think he didn't care. He threw caution to the wind and just did whatever he wanted to do. Um, and interesting, I see that this partly is about the Epstein files and Zorro Ranch. Zorro Ranch, Epstein's branch out in New Mexico, is also an eyes wide shut kind of place to my thinking. And why
Okay.
it has not been investigated till now boggles the mind. Because while you had Little St. James, the island in the Caribbean, and his
Mhm.
New York townhouse and his Palm Beach home raided, investigated, searched, everything taken away, as far as I can tell, nobody's touched Zorro Ranch, and now, what, almost 7 years after I'll say murdered because I don't believe that he was a suicide. Only now are they finally is New Mexico under pressure. The state of New Mexico, the legislature has decided that they should go in and search the grounds, not least because out of the Epstein files came an email that was a tip-off to the FBI that two foreign young women who were at Zorro Ranch are buried nearby. Now, that was 2019.
Oh.
Um, I don't know. Well, one can guess as to why the FBI didn't investigate. I have my own suspicions. I'll tell you what they are. Um, you had a couple things going on. One, Newsweek is reporting today that the DOJ in 2019 quashed an investigation into Zorro
Mhm.
Ranch. Maybe true, because the way I heard it, and I believe is true, is New Mexico State Police were investigating, and the DOJ demanded to take over the investigation and give it to the FBI.
Oh,
And it's
'cause it
and the New Mexico State Police objected to that, and instead of handing it over to the FBI, they closed it down. Well, why did they close it down? I can only put it down to the fact that former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson was one of those accused by Virginia Giuffre, the lady who accused the man who used to be a prince, Andrew, of having sex with her when she was only 17. She
Mhm.
said it was the same with Bill Richardson, that she was at Zorro Ranch, and Bill Richardson had sex with her when she was only 17. Okay. Well,
Yep.
all right. Bill Richardson wasn't governor in 2019. He'd already served his 2 terms. Uh, but you can imagine he had an awful lot of influence in New Mexico still.
Yeah.
He denied the allegation, by the way, but so did Andrew. And Andrew now looks like a total jerk for all of his denials. Nobody believes him anymore, and everybody's 100% convinced that Virginia Giuffre was telling the truth. So if she was telling the truth about Andrew, she was probably also telling the truth about Bill Richardson.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
make it
More
up?
than likely.
Why lie? And he's gone now, as I said. He died at a kind of a young age. He was only 72 or 73 at his summer home in Chatham, Massachusetts, of what has only been described ever in the media as natural causes. And I'm not quite, nobody knows why beyond quote unquote natural causes Bill Richardson died. I call it a slightly suspicious death, and I'm not a paranoid sort who thinks everybody's been murdered, but I
Hmm.
find it odd. I also know that he probably understood himself that his legacy was in ashes and deserved to be, because I piece things together uh, serendipitously, but I happened to be in Santa Fe, New Mexico in May of 2023, a few months before Bill Richardson died. And I'm talking to the bartender at the really nice hotel. They're called the Anasazi Hotel, probably the nicest one in Santa Fe. Nice bar. Talking to the bartender, and he says, "Oh, Bill Richardson comes in here and drinks all the time." I said, "Oh, cool. What's he like?" Um, I had no interest. I never really was interested in the Epstein files very much before. So I wasn't there as an investigative reporter, just happened to be staying there, drinking there. And he said, "Oh, well, he drinks too much. He comes in and he has too much to drink, and he's very argumentative with other customers." And it set me thinking, here's a guy who knew his legacy was in tatters. The jig was up. The truth was going to come out eventually. And although he may have done all he could to suppress it, including possibly ensuring that Zorro Ranch was never investigated as it should have been,
Yeah.
and then dies just a few months later. I don't know. Maybe it was from drinking too much. But
Maybe.
he was not a happy man in the end. He knew what he'd done, I think, and he knew it was going to come out eventually, or
Yeah.
rather, it
Yeah.
had come out. He knew that eventually down the road, his denials would fall on hollow ears.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, maybe, yeah, he was just kind of carrying that guilt and realized, man, we screwed up big time, you know. I
Seems to
really,
me, seems to me that would be the case. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, to not have that place fully investigated right away seems bizarre. And it's like, okay, who's going to benefit from this place not being investigated right away? Who's going to benefit from, you know, things not still being left under the rug? And
Uh, Absolutely. And now it may have been the worst place of all of his places, because now the witness testimonies are coming out from the Epstein files, suggesting not only the possibility of dead bodies, but human experiments,
my
with women
God.
being experimented on, anesthetized and put out, and being experimented, their reproductive organs perhaps messed with. Uh,
Oh my goodness.
that's what's now being suggested. And in fact, only it was today, big news today is that the New Mexico authorities did raid Zorro Ranch today to search. Now, when I say raid, the current owner of the ranch had been waiting to hear from them. He wasn't standing in the way. He had just been waiting to hear from them. Today, he heard from them. They're there, perhaps as we speak, searching
Oh,
the ranch
really?
and the grounds.
Wow. Okay, so a new owner owns the property. I'm assuming he's just like been waiting for the FBI to eventually call and,
Well, yeah, well,
or
it was he wasn't wait, nobody had ever contacted before a few weeks ago when the New Mexico legislature said, "Well, we're going to investigate Zorro Ranch," and then 2 weeks after that, someone in the media asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, they're welcome, but I haven't heard from them." So
wow.
it took them a while, but apparently they're on the job. Lot can get hidden in 6 years. Who knows what's been cleaned up? But then again, who was around to clean it up after Epstein died? Uh,
Mhm.
maybe a crew went in, but that's leaving it a little late. They should have been there in 2019, to my thinking.
Well, yeah, once those allegations came out that somebody was sexually assaulted and
Absolutely.
or abused
So,
there.
so what was going on? It seems
Right.
to me, it seems to me, for one reason or another, whether it was Washington or whether it was Santa Fe, the investigation into Zorro Ranch got quashed in 2019.
Yeah, and it was probably, for a reason to protect some people or probably a lot of people, who knows
Well,
how many people are involved with that place.
and when you think about it, there must be, I mean, there should be, they should be picking up evidence on various male members of the power elite who partook in these things. The only person who's ever gone to prison so far is a female who helped orchestrate the whole thing for Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's the only one in prison. What about the men who were doing these things to underage women?
Mhm.
That's what needs to come out, and they need to be investigated and prosecuted, and if found guilty, put in prison.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the accounts that are coming out, especially from this Zorro Ranch, is a lot of underage girls were involved in the activities there at that place. And that's, for them to
Yeah.
not investigate that back in 2019 is bizarre, especially when they went through all of his other properties.
And Zorro Ranch was probably the most diabolical all of his places.
Mm,
He knew he had the protection of the governor, who he was friends with, and he was way out there in the desert, and nobody could escape there. It would be
s
impossible for somebody to if once these women show up, they're practically prisoners of the place. They're not going to leave.
ugh,
They can't.
s that's crazy to think that, and what experiments would they be doing on women there? I mean, it's not like he's a doctor or anything. What is happening? What this guy
Oh,
was
hopefully they'll find out. But there are rooms in his
ugh,
place that photographs have emerged from the Epstein files of clinical medical type facilities. Uh,
wow.
so very scary stuff.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like it. Like, what are they doing with that stuff, and what are they doing to these women? And I hope, I mean, I hope more people can, get the word out of what happened to them if they are victims of this whole Epstein circles, because it's shocking what has been coming out, and know that it's just more and more. And now we have this whole Zorro Ranch. I never even heard of the Zorro Ranch until of recent
Mm.
new stuff, and to know that it wasn't investigated properly or at all. Nobody was asking the questions that needed to be asked at the time, which would have been more important. But I hope they can at least find something tangible that
Yeah.
we could at least put more people behind bars that belong there instead of just one person.
Absolutely. I mean, the sad part is there were a lot of people who came forward now, according to the Epstein files, they just weren't taken seriously or ignored. The powers that be did not want to know. And it
Uh-huh.
seems like the only time anybody in politics would want to know was for political reasons. Oh, what can I use from that against my opponent? That
Hmm.
was really their only interest, not justice, to my thinking.
Hmm.
Now you have
Yeah.
people in Congress like Nancy Mace who um who are very dedicated to getting the truth out. You know, let the chips fall where they may. It doesn't matter. It's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democrat thing. Whoever is culpable should be investigated and prosecuted.
Right. Yeah, it's justice. Justice doesn't
Yeah,
take a
and
side here.
nobody should be using it for political reasons. It should only be for justice.
Yeah, yeah, because it's, the victims of this whole orchestrated fiasco that is the Epstein files. They need justice. I can't imagine being a young girl and having been put in those positions. And a lot of their parents were very. It seemed like a lot of their parents were all full gung ho for their daughters to be hanging out with these elite politicians, and
Yeah,
Ah,
it's a mistake parents make. They think, okay, maybe I'll marry my daughter off to some very wealthy person. Well, that very wealthy person doesn't want to get married to him or give him money. They just want to use him like a toy.
yeah, yeah, and it's sad. It's very sad, and you know,
Despicable. Yeah.
annoying that you had to keep somebody from. Hey, you had to babysit a prince, basically, to keep him from falling into these types of behaviors that we now see unraveling in these documents of Jeffrey Epstein. And, you know, I mean, luckily nothing came about Prince Albert being tied to any of those things, because I would not want to be his PR person if he was tied to anything with the underage stuff with Epstein. That would have been a nightmare to have to handle.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised Andrew never introduced him to those circles. But then again, Andrew liked it for himself, perhaps. Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah, because him and Albert kind of their behavior kind of mirrored each other a bit.
Yes, it did.
Well, in the public eye, what you get from
Well,
news
public and private.
cycles,
What
but
we're discovering about Andrew now is in the private eye too. And for me, my insider look at Albert and how he was only really interested in his social life, shall we say, rather than affairs of state. That yes, it's not just in the public persona. That's what they were really like.
mhm.
Are you ready to step beyond the veil? June 11th through the 13th, something extraordinary is happening. Break On Through, a 3-day paranormal experience hosted by me, Dave Schrader, at the historic and haunted Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota. I'm bringing together some of the most respected psychic mediums and paranormal minds for a weekend that explores the unexplained, featuring special guest psychic mediums Chris Fleming, Diet Renee, and Sarah Lemos. This immersive event goes far beyond lectures. Dive into fascinating classes, presentations, take part in hands-on experiments, experience powerful live gallery readings, and join real paranormal investigations. So whether you're searching for answers, curious about the unknown, or hoping to connect with something beyond this world, this weekend is designed to open doors you never knew existed. 3 days, incredible guests, paranormal exploration, and more fun than should legally be allowed. Space is limited, so reserve your spot now. Visit darknessevents.com for details and tickets. That's darknessevents.com. Come explore the unknown and break on through. All right, Greg Lawson, me, Dave Schrader, we're here tonight. It's a
Now after you've left Monaco and left your service as Prince Albert's basically main guy, uh how did things how did things go after you left? Were some of the things that you implemented stay that way, or did everything just kind of dismantle and it's kind of back to the way it was beforehand?
In fact, it was going back the way it was. It was clear to me that Albert had lost interest in being informed, had lost interest in his intelligence service, had lost interest in being briefed by other intelligence services. The government had discovered our existence and was battering him to end it. They didn't want him to have an intelligence service. All this was going on, and I could see it was getting kind of dangerous for me to be there. I was invisible for most of the 5.5 years I worked for Albert, but that last 6 months, I was they knew my name, they didn't know my face, and it got dangerous, I think. And I thought, there's no point me sticking around here anymore. A, it's dangerous, and B, he's not part of the program. He doesn't really want to know. So I disassembled
Gotcha.
my intelligence service, let all of our various liaison partners know, and took all my files and moved back to the United States.
Wow. Just that
And then things started to get really bad there and have been getting worse and worse ever since.
No, no. You should have listened. That's what you always listen to your master. It's like Miyagi.
Well,
Always listen, wax on, wax off. You may not understand it now, Albert, but eventually, and yeah, and he's
yeah.
just it's crazy to think that you had to go in and put in an infrastructure of some type of intelligence agency to weed out what you were finding out, and come to find out that it's kind of like, this is how things are here, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, the moral compass that you had going into this is now spinning out of control. Because what do? Because your whole purpose of what you were doing was trying to clean everything up, and
Yep,
now
and
it's
I
like,
actually said that to him. Yeah, I mean, I could always tell with Albert, it was like whoever he last talked to was what he had programmed in his brain. So after we were making some progress for a while, but then at some point he said to me, "But that's always been the way of life here." When we were talking about something to do with corruption in one of his ministers, that's the way of life. And I know that phrase got beat into his head by whoever he just talked to the day before, the night before. And I said, "Yes, Albert. Uh, isn't that what it was you wanted to change?" He
right.
didn't have an answer. It was like, "You mean to tell me you didn't realize before that this is what Monaco is all about?" Well, you must have realized it because you actually made a point of saying at your investiture that you were gonna change it, that you were going to clean up your principality and introduce what you called a new ethic.
Right, otherwise you end up in the Epstein files, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, lucky
yeah,
for him, he didn't,
yeah,
but yes, but he's it hasn't been good for him. It's been a rough ride because it turned out, like I pointed out to him 20 years ago, his palace accountant was corrupt and his personal lawyer was corrupt. And what happens a couple years ago? They get exposed in the French media for being corrupt, and the accountant was actually escorted out of his job at the palace by the Carabinieri. Uh, and now is considered disgraced in all kinds of lawsuits with Monaco and Albert at the moment. It's a total mess. Yes, Albert should have listened. Okay,
mhm,
we knew what we were doing. We knew what we knew. We knew what we were talking about. He should have taken the advice of his intelligence service and dealt with all of the rubbish and the corruption when he had the chance 20 years ago. And he'd probably be looked upon very differently today than he actually is. He's
yeah,
I believe he's looked upon as a failure, and his legacy will be quite horrible because he's done all the wrong things.
right, right, yeah, he's definitely gonna be singing his shoulda, coulda, wouldas because, yeah, the turn that the road that he totally took is what where is being exposed on a day-to-day basis, that corruption, that, just this underground underbelly, being untrustworthy, and it's from little things to having little affairs and stuff like that to these large, mass, you know, things of money laundering and cartels and sex trafficking, and it's just, to clean it up, I mean, that seemed like it was probably a very honorable job for you to do, and to find out that that's not the way it's going, that had to been hard for you to handle, and I don't blame you for wanting to just walk away because
There's
it's
no
like, "What
point.
am
I
I
mean,
here for?"
the only point I could have gotten very wealthy if I'd chosen to be corrupt as well and remain in my
Mhm.
job. The going rate for organizing a lunch, if somebody wanted to have lunch with Albert, they would be willing to pay 50,000 euros. And at least
Wow.
one of his close palace associates, a courtier, was indulging in that kind of money to get Albert to attend somebody's yacht party, or to attend another party, or to have lunch or dinner. I had cash offers like that. I I it would be anathema to me to ever accept anything like that. In fact, because I was there to do exactly the opposite. I was
Mhm.
there to clean up the trash around Monaco and stop that sort of thing from happening.
Yeah.
But
Well
that's what everybody else was doing. And
well,
Albert ultimately became corrupt himself, and I could give you the perfect example of that,
mhm.
something he did that set the absolute wrong example to all of his ministers and everybody else around him, and that is he accepted a bribe from Vladimir Putin. Uh,
Oh,
Vladimir Putin of Russia He was president at the time. Of course, he went back and forth, his little charade of staying in charge from president to prime minister and back again. That time he was president, and he wanted the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, to be in Sochi in 2014. Well,
Mhm.
Albert has since the 1980s. He sits on the International Olympic Committee, and that's the committee that votes on where Olympic events should be held. Um, so Putin throws a state dinner for Albert uh, in coordination with Albert's expedition to the North Pole that happened in 2005.
Mhm.
It might have been 2006. And at this state dinner, Putin offers Albert a gift. What kind of gift? A whole house, a dacha. How would you like a dacha? Now, dacha is
What?
a traditional summer house that elite Russians have out in the country, and they leave Moscow to go to their dacha on the weekends. So
Oh.
he said, can we build one for you on the palace grounds? Albert said, well, there's no room, but how about if you build it at Rock Agel, which is the Grimaldi family farm high up in the mountains. I mentioned it earlier, where Albert escaped to when he should have been in Monaco working after his father passed and went up there to play volleyball. Well, that's the family farm. So he said, well, you can build it there. So what happens? A whole team of Russian construction workers show up and build him a dacha on the grounds of Rock Agel from scratch. Well, for a
Wow.
start, you can imagine that it's wired to the gills, to the rafters, with all kinds of recording equipment, which you'd never find. That's number
Yeah.
one. Number two is it is against the IOC's code of ethics for one of its members to accept a gift from a leader of a country or anyone that's in contention for Olympic an Olympic venue.
Uh-huh.
So Albert was oblivious to it. He probably didn't even know there was such a thing as a code of ethics. And he's not a personally greedy guy. It's not like he just
Yeah.
wanted to accumulate stuff, gifts or money or anything else. He has enough of it. He was just stupid. Okay. It
Yeah.
was just a really dumb thing to do. Here you are, you accept this very lavish gift, and you don't report it, of course, because you don't even know that you're supposed to. And it's in contravention of the IOC. So in that sense, Albert became corrupt himself, and everybody who learned of this dacha goes, okay, well, even Albert is taking bribes. So I guess it's
Oh.
okay again. We're not being cracked down at all. In fact, corruption increased, not decreased.
Wow. And to give somebody a house, that's oh, what do you mean? I didn't have to tell anybody he gifted me that. Oh, who are you
Okay,
gonna
so
say, "Where did you want the Olympics? Russia?"
so when you asked me if anything surprised me, well, that was kind of a surprise. But after that, nothing surprised me. And the
Yeah.
brothel in Moscow rented out for his birthday. It's how can you be surprised after a couple of those?
Right. Yeah, it's like, "Oh my gosh," you just going through the paper, you're just like, "Oh, geez, it's just getting worse as we go through." Oh
Yeah,
my god, I
and
can't imagine.
it's almost a good thing. I suppose I could have written this book soon after I left Albert's employ at the end of 2007, but it actually, in hindsight, made a lot more sense to finally write it now because of all that's happened since, and
Mhm.
how that my own role in Monaco has been largely vindicated. I was a little public when I first got out because I was a little unhappy that Albert had turned his back on his promises to do certain things, to clean things up. So I made some noise about it, and their reaction in Monaco was, "Who? Who? We don't know. Who? What are you talking about? He
Ooh,
didn't do what he claims to do." They tried to discredit me. And
yeah.
okay, fine, that's the game you want to play. We played that game for a bit. It's clear they know, and it. I guess nobody understood quite the extent of my operations. Number one, and two, that I actually retained all my files,
Yeah?
and that everything that I was saying back then a few years later, everybody in the French media who were scratching their heads wondering how I could know these things and they couldn't possibly be true are going, man, if you go back and read what he was saying and read what he wrote back then, it's all come true,
Right.
and it has.
Well,
So that was a great time to put the book out.
yeah, it was the book, The Spy Master of Monte Carlo, Tales of Royalty, Espionage, and Betrayal. I'll have a link for that in today's description. I highly recommend it. And if you guys buy the book and read it, rate and review it online, wherever you buy your book, it helps those books get seen more. When people are searching up specific topics, those will pop up right away. I can't wait to dig into it myself because I love these kind of stories and to know that it just how all these it ties into reality that we're dealing with today and with the whole Epstein files, all that kind of how these elite people think they can just get away with murder, with money laundering, with corruption and fraud is beyond me. But your book kind of sheds a light on that and to say, this is how they just get away with it. And people like you, Robert, you have this moral compass, and when that compass is getting interrupted, what do? Well, you did the right thing. You walked away, and now exposing kind of the crap that you had to deal with. And I'm sure that's where all governments' fault is in that kind of same corrupted vein. And money talks, and so does sex apparently with these people because they are into some kinky stuff and some weird stuff. I'm not
Yep.
gonna lie. But yeah, the book again, The Spy Master of Monte Carlo. Do you have a website or anything that people can go to?
I do. As an independent journalist, I operate on Substack, so it's roberteringer.substack.com. And I post nearly every day on Monaco, but also on other topics, including Zorro Ranch and the Epstein files, and some fiction as well. I've written some spy fiction based on operations and adventures that happened, but I could never talk about. So you have to put
Oh.
them through a meat grinder and turn it into a novel instead.
Yeah, I know. But the hey, with every great fiction story, there's always a bit of truth in it. And I love that. And I even love true crime fiction stories because I know there's a little bit of truth in everything. So it's just kind of nice to get out of that kind of factual narrative and kind of make it colorful. And I think it helps the reader kind of really grasp what the case is about or what you're actually trying to get across in the book, because it
Yeah.
kind of puts them into the crime scene and the story itself. So I like fictional true crime stuff and stuff like that. So I think it's a perfect blend of facts and fiction. So go check it out, and I'll put a link for your Substack along with a link to buy your book. Again, in the description notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Robert, and thank you all. And I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you for having me, Winnie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.